The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
Welcome to a decidedly malty episode of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. This is Dave, your host and author. Here we are at it yet again. Hopefully you had a chance to go to one of the two awesome beer festivals that we just featured on the Florida Beer Podcast over the past couple of weeks. And we're going to actually be checking in with both of those beer festivals again in the next couple of episodes. But before we do that, I'm going to give you an episode that I've had simmering for quite some time. Finally got to be able to record it, and I think it's going to be pretty awesome. I hope you enjoy. Before we get to that, though, definitely make sure to like and subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. Hopefully you'll be able to leave a nice 5-star review. You can also find us on social medias at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, as long as Elon Musk lets us be on there. We're on Facebook at FL Beer Blog, and obviously on the interwebs at FloridaBeerBlog.com, FloridaBeerPodcast.com, or you can reach out to us at FloridaBeerBlog@gmail.com. We're also a very proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, which keeps releasing some awesome stuff, which is great, and I definitely want you to go through and listen to some of the other shows that are coming down from the network. That you can do at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com. And if you're on the Facebook, FPN Insiders is the name of our closed Facebook group where you will get all sorts of new, awesome insider information. Now, obviously, for those of you that are familiar with beer, you know that there's 4 main ingredients. Water tends to be something that a lot of people like to talk about at the beginning because everybody likes to talk about their water systems or how good the water is, so on and so forth. Hops, everybody likes to talk about those. What hops did you use? When did you use them? How much did you use? So on and so forth. Yeast is sort of there. And for the most part, if you're really talking about the yeast, you've got a couple of different varieties of beer that you are talking about that yeast in the context of. But malt, I just don't get a whole lot of feeling for love for malt. It seems to be the one ingredient in beer that people sort of take for granted. And that's kind of sad because it is amazing. Actually, not too long ago, I visited a brewery doing an episode there. You'll hear that in a couple of weeks. But they were mashing in. And they were milling the grain as I was there, and I was invited to help pour some bags into the hopper, and the owner was very liberally taking little handfuls of grain so he could eat some and I could eat some, and going through a couple different varieties of grain. I think they were brewing a blonde ale at the time. So it was mostly, your base malt, but they had about half a bag of honey malt and half a bag of a few others. And it was kind of fun to sit there and watch it and exactly how important that malt is to the brewing process. Very few people really understand malt the way that brewers do. I myself definitely had to learn the entire process because I just did not appreciate what it was, never really knew what it was. And to that end, Riverbend Malt House in Asheville, North Carolina, has actually been doing a really good job of promoting malt outside of the beer industry and mostly to craft beer aficionados, and obviously promoting themselves to people in the craft beer industry. And it's actually kind of cool if you go to their website. Not only do they make a lot of the basics themselves, but they also can do custom blends for breweries. If a brewery wants to do something in particular, they can chat with the team at Riverbend and have bags of something very special made explicitly for them. And to hear about this a little bit more, we're going to be speaking to Tyler Adams. He is the territory sales manager for Florida and Georgia. He's based here in the Sunshine State, but he'll go to the Peach State on occasion as needed. And we're going to talk to Tyler about the history of Riverbend Malt House, about how malting is done for those of you listeners that aren't totally familiar with the process. For the brewers that are listening, we'll talk about those custom blends, and we'll actually talk a little bit about some of the collaborations that Riverbend Malt House does with other brewers. They will actually go, and Tyler did this in St. Petersburg a couple months ago with Grand Central Brew House in St. Pete, and obviously bringing on 8 Foot Brewing from Cape Coral as well. This is before Hurricane Ian. We actually did not get the time to talk about Hurricane Ian because it had not hit before this episode was recorded. Since the hurricane came through, there actually was a lot that Tyler and Riverbend tried to do and are continuing to do in terms of supporting the support brews such as Florida Strong or Florida Can Recover. They're trying to support those particular causes and raise money for those people that are affected. Obviously, this was recorded before that happened, so we're not going to be talking about that, but that is something that they've been doing and something I applaud them for, absolutely. But we are still going to be talking about malt, and we are going to be speaking to Tyler Adams about malt, and I think that is absolutely fantastic. So go ahead and grab a beer or maybe even a bowl of cereal, which actually kind of sounds really good right now, and enjoy this interview with Tyler Adams, Riverbend Malt House. So for people that have never heard of a malt house, maybe never even heard of malt, they just drink the beer to drink beer, what exactly is malt, and what exactly does Riverbend do to make said malt?
Well, I guess the answer to the more basic of the questions right now, malt is actually the grains that's basically used to convert starches into sugar and sugar into alcohol to create the beer. It's actually, minus the water, it is the second most ingredient that's in a beer. If you're not adding fruit or any of that, actually malt adds all the colors depending on how much you basically roast the malt. So, a lot of the flavor and stuff in beer actually comes from the malt, and the way the thing is, you don't think of it that way, but we're talking about wheat, barley, rye, pretty much all the same stuff, grains that go into bread, or the same grains that are going to the beer. The difference is it's been malted, and that's where we come in as Riverbend Malt House, where on a basically quick way to go through our process, there's 3 major steps. It's steeping, germination, and kilning. So we get the raw seed, no matter if it's barley, wheat, rye, it all has to go through those same steps. You steep it first, which basically tricks it into, the seed believes it's kind of like spring, so it'll start sprouting. Once it starts sprouting, we'll take it over into germination and let it continue to grow and basically get a full enzyme and starch package for the brewers. That's how you get your sugar for your yeast to eat to turn into beer eventually. And so germination is what's making that conversion. And then at the end, we kill that germination because you can't let it grow too much, because then it'll actually start turning into a blade of grass and taking away from that package that the brewers want to brew beer. So you take it over the kiln, you kill it, keep the package, and then you basically roast it to your light straw colored, domestic beer, all the way up to your, Guinness stout per se. Once you got that stuff was ready to be bagged to go and sent to your local brewer. And then we'll just leave it in the brewer's hands. They're the artists. We're just making it in the paint for the artist per se.
That's awesome. So you don't actually grow any of the grains yourselves. How do you source those grains that you then malt?
For the bigger guys, they kind of have it easy. They go buy a lot of land and they just have their own farms. But that wasn't the goal of our company per se. Actually, just a quick little side story on that was Brent and Brian, they were looking in Asheville to get into the brewing industry, looked around and they thought, wow, we would be the 13th brewery And that's way too many. So let's start a malt house. Now, that being said, there's like 40 in the Asheville market now, but that is what they wanted to do. They wanted to be the local connection to brewers. So they went out, actually found local farms who were growing grains, having success growing grains, buying them from local farms and starting there. So starting out in North Carolina, spreading out pretty much Tennessee, Virginia, Kentucky, Georgia, and even a little bit of black rye coming from Florida. We like to try to find, if you're brewing beer in your state, we want to try to offer something from your state in there. So we actually go out to your mom and pop farms and farmers and try to make a relationship and buy their grain so we can sell it to brewers. So the consumer can also enjoy something from their locality.
That's kind of awesome. And I guess, is there a big difference in flavors and the grains that you're getting from Tennessee versus, say Virginia versus Florida? Do the grains tend to be better at doing different things and making different beers?
So actually, that's kind of fun. That's where we're kind of diving deep into right now as lagers are coming back onto the scene and pretty much in a gold rush type fashion. Malt is the main flavor of these lagers. Very well balanced, very peculiar flavors. There's a lot of balance and a lot of play for the actual terroir. And I guess the biggest example for this we have is our Cumberland Pilsner, which comes off the Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee, and our Chesapeake Pilsner coming from the Chesapeake Bay of the Virginia area. Those are single origin malts. So we just get them for those two farms and we make pilsners with them. So they're pretty much malted to the same spec. But the Cumberland is a little bit more softer and doughy, while the Chesapeake is a little bit more grassy, which play into several different types of beers. How we like to sort of lead brewers into, or at least start the conversation of flavor. If you think Cumberland is really great for like a Helles, something where you really want the malt to shine, that you're not going to add any flavors, where the Chesapeake, we like sort of pushing people towards an actual very dry, a little bit more hoppy, bitter Pilsner, because the grassy flavors really play with those hops really nice. At the end of the day, it's up to the brewer what they want to do. But yes, you're very correct. There's a southern terroir in all these malts, and we believe that we're just trying to make that pop. And well, that's one of the motives that we're really trying to push. Like, hey, you just getting the big malt over here doesn't mean you're going to get the same flavor from us. Yeah, you would be correct in assuming that there's definitely different flavors to explore here.
And I'm definitely interested in what did you call black rye that's coming from Florida. Where is that coming from? What kind of flavors and beers can you generally see being made with that particular grain?
So that is a really unique grain, where that was pretty much the University of Florida has been working on that. It doesn't really have a sexy name yet. It's FL, or Florida 401. But essentially what they did is took an heirloom variety called Seashore Black Rye and made it a little bit more resistance for the weather down here in Florida. Mainly, grain has a hard time growing in these warmer, humid climates because fungus can get trapped in between the husk and the seed. And that's kind of the biggest pest that we fight in the grain world in the Southeast. So they've actually come up with one that was very resistant to these fungus, and it's working really good. But the uniqueness of it is that black rye, where you think of like a regular bruisey, or what you think of regular rye when you get a rye pumpernickel bread, is very like black peppercorn, farmhouse sort of strawy, where this one goes more baking spice, a little bit less on the astringent spice and a little bit more savory. So it's been making some really unique beers over the past year and a half that we've had in the market. Florida is loving it, and we've been seeing some really unique beers being made with it.
Awesome. That's really cool to hear. So obviously you've got a lot of brewers that will call in and ask for your malt. And you mentioned, such as a couple of different Pilsner malts that you make. In terms of the basic malts, the ones that you always have in stock, the ones that if I were to, order 10 bags or however many pounds of it, you can tell I haven't brewed on an industrial scale. What kind of varieties do you generally carry on a regular basis? And what have been sort of your top movers and shakers?
So as far as base malt goes, actually, this has been a very big initiative for us this year. Again, going back to that lager movement, we have 6 potential base malts that we like to sell across the board, which is actually extremely high. Most people will offer you a 2-row, which is basically good for pale ales, IPAs. It's nothing super special in a Pilsner. which is just pretty much the lightest end of the scale. That's what most people offer. Well, we decided to keep going deeper into that and give people more option and more customability, where we have 5 total. So we have Base Camp and Southern Select. Those 2 are actually made with the same sort of combination of raw grains, but one sits around 2.5 SRM, one sits around 1.8. So Base Camp is the 1.8 SRM. It's the lighter. It's, again, a basic pale ale. Can pretty much be used for anything, where Southern Select, a little bit more darker. I think about Maris Otter. That's how we kind of like to compare it to a good just English pale malt. And then we have our 6-row Pilsner, which is actually rather unique because there's not too many people offering a 6-row even as an option these days. And
it seems that 2-row is the more popular.
That it is. It's easier to convert, and it's a little bit plumper grain, so you usually get a little bit better extract. But where a 6-row Pilsner is going to give you that more grassy, spicy flavor, it's great in saisons, wild fermentation beers, pre-prohibition lagers. There's definitely a space for it, and we love offering the space for a 6-row for people who want to really dive deeper into that. And then we have the 2 single origin Pilsner I was explaining earlier. Again, one a little bit, we like to say, used for softer, less hoppy typically. And then we have the Chesapeake, which actually won a bronze medal at the Malt Cup this year, which is a worldwide malt competition.
Oh, wow.
And that's a little bit more grassy, plays with hops a little bit better. And yeah, we just go from there. We let people choose what they want to brew with on a base, and try to give you more options to do it. And I guess we kind of have another 6th, but it's weird, but it's also for the super beer nerds out there. We're kind of calling it a Czech Pilsner, but it's just because we're just kind of like following some Czech Pils or something, especially since people were getting back into decoction brewing, and actually slightly under modified malt meant for people who are wanting to decoct and step mash these days, because we see that trend coming back up. So that was a little bit more of the beer nerdy. Like, not all systems are really great for decocting, but if you can, we're trying to give you a really cool option to do the full process instead of decocting fully modified malt.
Awesome. You did use a phrase or an acronym in there that I want to pause for some of my less malt enthusiast listeners, and that was SRM. Can you define that for a brief moment?
So SRM, the best way to think of it is it's the color of the malt. It's the darkness. So when you're talking about lower of the scale, like a 1, you're talking about like almost water with a tint of gold, all the way up to around 140. And that is pitch black Guinness, and pretty much everything fits in between. So as you scale it up, you start at Pilsner 1, you get to 3, which is like an English pale. A 6 is like a Vienna. And it just works up the scale until you get to your red ales, browns, porters, stouts. So
awesome. Also, let's see, another style of beer that is very, very dependent on the malt that is used, that doesn't have a ton of fans, but the fans of this style are very, very passionate, would be the Rauch beer. Do you have a smoker? Do you offer smoked malts? And how often do those move for you?
So yes, actually, that has been something I've been hired on for about 3 years now. And that is pretty much when we started playing with our new smoker. And we have had a bunch of success with it. We actually do a more unique style. We call it cold smoking.
Okay.
We can take any finished product and smoke it however people want it, or for us, just pure R&D purposes and have fun with it, which means we kind of use a big box where we could put up to 500 pounds of malt basically in a vented box or a vented shelf essentially, and we will vent the smoke from about 20 feet out from where the fire is actually on, vent it into that container with the malt and smoke it for about 8 hours to give it basically no SRM, or we won't make it darker from the heat, but we'll add all the smoke flavors, which actually makes some really cool malts, because I could take a Pilsner, I could take a wheat, a rye, anything that's sitting in our racks, and I can use any wood that we can get our hands on and smoke them all. And Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Some of the stuff we've tried have been very astringent, and some of the stuff we've had that we didn't think was going to be great turned out to be phenomenal. Even right now, we're actually got a Georgia Peachwood smoked wheat. That was one of our most recent projects. And we actually offer anybody who wants to come. Like, it is a 500-pound minimum, so it is a little bit steep, but you can actually do a full custom smoked malt if you want to. Our most popular is our pecan smoked wheat, which is a year-round offering, and it's really brought around, like, you're even talking about a Roush beer. Rotzers and Grodziskis, man, is what's been hitting us a lot, and those are extremely rare to see these days as well.
Yeah, that I've actually started to see those show up quite a bit more, which is interesting that you say that. But you also mentioned custom malts. And this is where Riverbend gets really interesting, because you will make a custom blend for a customer. How did you get started in that particular business? Because it seems to be very labor intensive and doesn't have quite the return that just malting, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Pilsner malts all at once and just selling the bags as needed. It seems like a custom malt is going to be a lot lower return.
So for us, we're uniquely set up where it's not that big of a deal for us, mainly because our custom malt section is what our old big system used to be, and is actually what we do most of our specialty malts on, which is our floor malting system. That's kind of a cool thing that we still have both the old world way and a new world way. So as you scale up the recipes where it makes sense to do 10 tons at one time, we'll shift them to the 10-ton batch. But our original system before we moved to our third location was a simple 2-ton batch where we actually still pull rakes through the germination system and then put it into a kiln, where that one has all 3 stages, where the new system, germination and kilning, is all done in the same vessel. So you kind of combine 2 of the steps for the bigger system. So essentially what we can do is freed up is where all our R&D goes with anyways. We can offer a brewer to come. We do, we'll hold it for a little bit or whatnot, but you do need to commit to 2 tons, which in the grand scheme of things is not too much. Base malt, you're using a lot more poundage than smoked malt. And then essentially tell us what you want. We'll take you through our raw grains and basically give you the building blocks. And basically we'll sit down there, write out a malt and do it to that spec through a floor malt system. We even love to invite the brewers and their teams to come pull rakes through the malt, so they kind of get a hands-on feeling for that as well. So yeah, that's just something we really like doing, and it's opened up the doors and actually found us a couple of new malts around the Southeast that we didn't think we were going to have access to, where like our Kentucky Pills, that grain came from a custom malt project. So
that's kind of awesome.
So,
and not only will you take those malts, but you actually, not only Riverbend as a company, but you personally will participate in brew days where brewers are specifically using the custom malts that you make. And as an example, and I kind of wish I was able to try this beer, unfortunately, I never got the chance to. You were just in St. Pete at Grand Central Brewhouse with 8 Foot Brewing out of Cape Coral as well.
Yes, so that was a really cool collaboration. The beer was inspired by a German Kochbuscher, which is basically an adjunct Kolsch, where you add honey, wheat, oats to it.
Okay.
And essentially, we went really sort of old school world in that, used the Cumberland Pills, some of our Streaker oats, which unfortunately we do not have any more of those this year, but naked oats kind of give a more creamy mouthfeel and made a really awesome beer. But going back to what you're saying, we'd love to get out and be connected to a brewer. It's just going back to what our founders founded the business on, was a love for brewing and trying to bring locality to the brew house. We love hanging out with brewers and seeing what they're liking and seeing what they're doing. So of course we want to hang out with them when they're brewing with our stuff and help inspire ideas and help make connections. That's what the craft beer movement was about and still is about. And that's why we go out and do it that way.
That's kind of awesome. Have you done any other collaborations like this here in the state of Florida?
So probably another big one where it was just a single brewery, but it ended up winning a gold medal at y'all's Florida's Best this past year. which is a fantastic beer fest. I actually wish more states do it just because it's kind of like hometown rivalries.
Exactly.
Come here and see if you can win. But Crooked Can, we did something, we called it the Carolina Common, where we used our 10th anniversary Sunset wheat, which was like a 10 SRM Munich wheat. So it was like super toasty, super sweet, combined with the Florida Black Rye and some Cumberland Pills and a little bit of Vienna malt. So it was a pretty complex malt build at that. Ended up making the goal was trying to get sort of like a steam beer, California Common style ale. Not the purest definition of it, but fantastic beer. It won in the amber ale category this past year. We were super proud of that one. But yeah, all across the state, we've done some stuff with Hourglass as well. And again, even further than that, it's like I've done stuff with Trim Tavern, Alabama, Arches here in Georgia. It's just, again, if we're willing to explore the space, we'll try our best to get out there and hang out and be a part of the process from step one.
That's kind of awesome. And so I guess I would assume that at this point, you've sort of discovered all the malts that are really there. You've made all the experimentation that you can. A lot of the business going forward are going to be mostly taking all of the same malts that you've used and sort of made these ingredients. So is there any new malt that's coming down in the future?
So we're always doing R&D, but something that we're really excited for right now is this new grain variety called Avalon. So
kind of like Mist of Avalon.
So don't quote me on too much of the specifics, but this is basically what I'm trying to purvey from our founder, Brent. But essentially, they've been working on this malt since we pretty much opened 10 years ago.
Wow.
Working with Virginia Tech. And this is the first grain that was been bred through Southern grain varieties that was done. It's not genetically modified. It was like old school seed breeding. Yeah. So yeah, it's not even genetically modified. That's why it's taken so long to get to this point. And actually a Southeastern 2-row malting grain. So we're excited to start getting some of that in our house. We're starting to send some samples out to our customers, going in for hopefully a big 2023 when we're getting seed stock now. So the seed stock we're getting in now will be going out to fields to really bump up that volume number for 2023 for sure. But that's probably one of the most exciting things we've had in a long time, since it's literally been in the works.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tyler. I do appreciate your time, and I will be excited to see what kind of new things you have coming out of the Malt House.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for having me on.
So there we go. Everything that you ever wanted to know about malted barley, and maybe just a little bit more. And like I was saying, they have been very good at the Hurricane Ian fundraising beers. So that is definitely something I would love to chat with him about again in the future, just to sort of check in and see how everything is going. For the next couple of episodes of the Florida Beer Podcast, we are going to be visiting those brew fests that we had our sneak preview episodes about a few weeks ago. Next one is going to be North Miami Brew Fest in North Miami Beach. It is one of my favorite beer festivals in the state of Florida, and I definitely encourage you to come back and listen to a lot of the great stuff that we did while we were there. In the meantime, please make sure to follow us on social media at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, FL Beer Blog on Facebook. If you want to reach out to us, you are more than welcome to do so at floridabeerblog@gmail.com. And if you are listening to us on the podcasting app of your choice, be it Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you are, make sure to follow us and like and subscribe so that way you will find out all about those new episodes the moment they are released. Obviously, if you can rate us, please give us a nice juicy 5 stars. It really does help us grow, and it will help more people find out about awesome things in their communities, such as Riverbend Malt House and North Miami Brewfest and all sorts of other great things. Got a lot more fun that's coming in the works. I cannot wait to tell you all of the news, but unfortunately, you are just going to have to wait. So in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Our intro announcer is Jeff Brozovich. Field producer is Steve Pekala. Executive producer for the Florida Podcast Network and Grand High Poobah is Jemmy Legagneur. This is Dave, your host and author. Thank you so much for listening. I do appreciate it. We will see you next week for a very raucous episode at the North Miami Brewfest. Thank you so much. And drink Florida craft.